still maybe trying to get that corrected. Welcome to the Wednesday GAM rules seminar. Today we're going to be covering Rule 3, the competition, and Rule 4, players equipment. But a couple of
still sharing. Okay.
been a couple of housekeeping items. I want Barry Babbitt is only here for a few minutes, so I want to have him have a chance to voice his comments on what's happening with the USGA Rule School. You know, certainly GAM encourages all the volunteers to attend a Rule School. It's very helpful in your educational process, and we encourage you to enroll in the Rule School. However, if you are enrolling in the Rule School for the primary purpose of taking the quiz, the actual process of taking the quiz is quite it's interesting. And I'm gonna let Barry's got some details on what he can share with you, the details on what you need to do in order to take I think it's both the 80 and the 100 quiz, isn't it, Barry? Both 80 and 100?
Yes. First of all, I mean since you couldn't attend a class, everything was virtual. But they have videos on each of the rules presentations that I can access because I signed up for the class all the way through the 4th of April. And they really did a good job. I mean, it's the usual teachers that are doing it, and some of the other people from USGA, but I thought they did a real good job. They have a 1-week session of 90 minutes with 2 instructors, one from the USGA, one from the PGA. That's primarily questions and answers. They briefly review the highlights of some specific rules, and then it's all question and answer. And I thought that too was kind of helpful, although they didn't record those so that you can go back. When you sign up, you can take the test. They finally got everything figured out how to do it, and it's going to be done virtually. And just to let you know what it entails, if you decide to do it. Before you start the exam, you need to undergo a check-in process with a live agent. And during that process, you'll scan your room, the corners of the floor and ceiling, your chair, including underneath, your table and desk, including underneath, your hands and forearms, your ears, behind your ears to check for audio devices, pockets in your clothing. If you have other electronics in your room, such as a TV or another computer, you're going to be asked to unplug them. And you're going to have blank scratch paper. You may not use a mechanical pen or pencil, such as one that clicks. No jewelry, including rings, earrings, necklaces, etc. You are not permitted to use a watch. There will be a timer. You may not have any food or drink in the room with you while you're taking the exam. And you also have to have Google Chrome on your computer, because without it, you can't take the exam. So if you're thinking about taking the virtual exam, I think those are probably some conditions that, I mean, it's not one that I can meet here. I guess if I could come to the GAM office and sit in the conference room, I could probably take the test that way. But you'd have to find a place to do that where you're all alone and with nobody else around. You have to turn off any notifications that you get on your computer as well, because that could disrupt the flow. And they worry about pure and simply, whether or not your Wi-Fi connection is going to work. So this may not be the year to take the exam. So anyway, thanks, Greg.
Okay, thanks, Barry.
Hey, Barry. Craig, this is John Schulte.
Hey,
This is John Schulte. I signed up and received the same instructions that Barry did, and I was just appalled at what's going on. I sent 2 emails over the course of the several days back to the USGA, got no response from them, but I can't believe that this is happening in the golf industry. It was pretty embarrassing. I'm not taking it. I've told them that. So thank you.
Thanks, John.
It's probably easier to get a top security government clearance.
I think you're right, Marv.
Yep.
Okay, so just be careful if you're signing up for the Rule School for the sole purpose of taking the exam. You should be aware of that. But certainly, we still want you to take the school itself is very informative, very educational, and we would want to encourage you to go through that process and and just not worry about taking the exam this year. Another housekeeping item from last week, we had an item discussed about club length in determining club length and whether a player was required to take the head cover off or not. And as John Allen pointed out, it's not even required to lay a club down to determine your area of relief as long as the player is well within the relief area as defined by the player's longest club, other than the putter. So Dr. Hicks sent an email to the USGA inquiring about that, what their policy is. And I'm going to kind of go through his USGA reply on that. Dear Dr. Hicks, there are no hard and fast rules referees must follow. The committee is in charge of the committee in charge is responsible to instruct referees regarding how they want them to perform their duties. In USGA championships, we instruct our referees to respond to players when they ask for assistance and otherwise practice preventative officiating by intervening to stop a player about to breach a rule, if possible. In applying preventative officiating, we would expect a referee to step in if a player marked a club length with their driver with the head cover on, thereby giving themselves an inch or too large of a relief area, and after dropping their ball, it came to rest in that extra space correctly measured, one club length would not include. So it sounds like what they're saying is they necessarily wouldn't step in. My interpretation of what they step in, maybe there's other interpretations. My interpretation is they wouldn't step in with, if they'd allow the player to use the head cover, but only they'd step in if that ball were dropped in such a space that were included in the area where the extra space was allowed based on the head cover being on the club. That's my interpretation. Are there any other viewpoints? Dr. Hicks, how did you think about how did you take that?
Just the same as you, Craig, basically just hands off and realize that this is probably once in a season type event. And it would only come and play with someone's head cover that is one of these elaborate things that is 3 or 4 or 5 inches. But it's just common sense approach, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so I would think if we generally don't want to step in too much anyway. We can't typically when a player that is knowledgeable and we've at certain levels of competition, I'm not going to step a player through the process of defining his nearest point of relief if he's going about it and doing it in the right way. I'm going to let him or her proceed unless I see a problem. Then I might step in. But I'm going to let a player proceed on their own in determining nearest point of relief before I step in and start, advising otherwise. So that's just a point of clarification. I think we've reached a conclusion on how we want GAM volunteers to proceed on that in most cases. All right.
But the rule says, however, if the club has a head cover on it or has an attachment to the end of the grip, neither is allowed to be used as part of the club when using it to measure. That's right there in the rule. So that means it's got to come off.
Doesn't mean it's got to come off, correct. It's not included in the relief area, but it does not need to come off in measuring. Okay, another housekeeping item. Mick Kildee wanted me to share with you all the first of all, I want to welcome. We understand we have a lot of new volunteers on today's call. So welcome to our Wednesday GAM rules seminar. We have a consultant in Mexico who graciously puts together rules quizzes. He has just recently distributed a rules quiz. And if you want to get in touch with him, can everybody see that? Here is his email. Little crude presentation here, little crude visual aid here, but that's mickkildee@gmail.com. Contact Mick Kildee at this email address, and he will put you on his distribution list for the February quiz and all future quizzes.
He accepts stock tips too.
Everybody got this down? All right. In last this last weekend's farmers tournament. I thought this probably pretty topical. We had a rule seminar. It's been debated about quite a bit. I want to give credit to the prophet Dan Longeway for predicting this would happen at some point, where the USGA in the pre-2019 rules changed their procedures on what a player was required to do before the player determined whether or not his or her ball was embedded. So in a scenario where you are a GAM volunteer and you're driving your car down the cart path and you're heading back to lunch, you're going to grab a lunch, and you see a player out in the fairway frantically waving you over there, and you drive, oh, you say to yourself, oh, crap, he knows I saw him, so I can't just keep going. I got to go over there and see what's going on. So you drive over there, and at this point, the player has, it's pretty apparent the player has marked his ball because he's got a tee down by an empty spot, and he's moved his ball off to the side, and he's asked you to determine whether or not his ball was embedded or not. Has the player had any, in your opinion, has the player made any rules violation?
No.
I mean, according to if you look at the rule, they seem like the broadcasters on CBS sure wanted to jump all over Patrick Reed. But when I first saw the televised replay of the CBS replay where they showed the ball bouncing, everybody got kind of all up in arms about whether or not, it seemed like because of the mere fact that the ball bounced, I thought that in itself might be a problem. But in looking at the rule, it doesn't say whether or not the ball can bounce once or twice before the ball could become embedded. I mean, the rule states that if the ball is embedded in its own pitch marker, that's all it says. Whether the ball bounces beforehand once or twice, it's really irrelevant. I found it interesting that everybody was jumping all over Patrick Reed's case when in fact, it looked like he did everything he had to do. He didn't even notify his fellow playing partners that he was about to take relief, and he was advised that the marshal on the hole said that it did not bounce, and he said that if he had been informed that it had bounced, he probably wouldn't even have examined the ball to see if it were embedded or not. But I found the whole situation rather interesting. Anybody else want to comment on that?
A lot of people don't like Patrick Reed because of the fact of, his history. He's very arrogant. And years ago, he said he's one of the top 5 players in the world without backing it up with stats. So he did it correctly, but he catches flack for everything because, like I say, a lot of the players don't like him and a lot of fans don't like him.
I think there's a lot of Patrick Reed haters out there.
The commentators don't like him. I was upset. I thought they handled it terribly.
Yeah, when they did a round robin of all the announcers that were there that day, no one stood up for Patrick Reed except for their guest rules official guy, which said, he did everything correct, and yet it didn't.
He was on the tour payroll.
He's on the tour payroll, but sure, the broadcasters sure weren't going to be weren't helpful at all to Patrick Reed's case whatsoever. I think it just spurred. I think they liked the controversy, gets our ratings up.
Craig, I think we're-
This is John Allen. I think one thing we should emphasize to players, and I do particularly high school players when I talk, is as a general principle, never touch your golf ball until you first mark it with a coin, a tee, or some other small object. And number 2, even though you're no longer required to, announce what you're up to if there's a rules official, fine, there isn't, but at least to your opponent or competitor, and say, I would like to check this ball to see if it's embedded, or I would like to take relief from this sprinkler head. Announce what you're doing so that people have a chance to object, and you don't do it the wrong way. You get a chance to figure out how to do it the right way before you do it. And neither one of those are required by the rules, but I think they're just good common sense.
Yeah, I agree, John. I think that's good in match play because you're with the match and you can talk to them prior to the start of play. I don't know that we are going to include things like that in our starters instructions for all the other players, but I mean, we often tell players that, don't pick up your ball because once the ball is in your hand, you know, the outcome is out of your hand. You know, maybe something you're not going to be able to control at that point in the future.
Hey, Craig.
Just to-
Craig, this is Dan. A couple of points is that, first of all, the announcers don't know the rules. Number two, most of the players don't know the rules very well. Because if you heard Rory McIlroy on 18 asking his fellow competitor, is it one or two club lengths for my relief
Yeah.
on a simple embedded ball? Now, you know, you would think a touring pro would know that. So don't make the assumption that they all know the rules, because they don't.
All right.
Can I add something too, Craig?
Yeah, Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, two things. One, back to the taking the head cover off or not taking the head cover off. I think if you're a referee, the first, just going on to what Dan just said, not only don't the tour players know the rules, but certainly that when it filters down to our even Michigan Amateur or women's amateur championships or the juniors, they certainly don't also know the rules. And procedurally, sir, isn't it the best thing to do when you see somebody trying to figure out what to do on relief to say, can I help you, or how can I help you, or do you understand your relief procedures, as kind of an introductory way to prevent somebody from making a mistake.
Yeah, it's a good point, Lee. We all often want to approach players and have them ask you for help, not, you know, don't jump in and assume that you know all the facts. Ask them what the situation is and how can you help them proceed so they can stay within the rules.
And I guess the other thing, just again, stepping back a little bit, is that embedded balls are only in the general area as of 2019, right? Unless, you know, so that's a little bit of a change from what the rules were previously, unless there was a local rule. So that's kind of an important.
Yeah, they expanded the embedded ball rule by nature. That we used to require a local rule to include, at that point it was called through the green, because before that, the rules only allowed for embedded balls in closely known areas.
Right. So now it's anywhere in the general area, which precludes penalty areas, bunkers. The green you get relief no matter what. But I think that's I
think it's still the exception when balls embedded in sand.
Right. That's the big one.
Okay, so let's move on to Rule 3, the competition. Rule 3 covers playing either in match play or stroke play. There's three central elements of golf competitions. It's either match play or stroke play. You're either playing as an individual or with a partner as part of a side. And you're either scoring either by a gross score with no handicap, strokes applied, or you're playing with a net score with handicap, strokes applied. GAM tournaments, we have all forms of that. We have stroke, match play, and we have both gross scores, and we have handicap tournaments. Match play, obviously you're playing against an opponent. In GAM tournaments, all of our match play tournaments are extended throughout. If there's a tie at the end of the 18 holes, the match is extended. We do not have any result based on tied matches. In stroke play, we have normally our competitions are 18 holes, not always. It's defined in the local rules. And you are playing either as an individual or with your own partner. We're competing as a side. Match play is unique because you're playing against just each other. You don't have to worry about other interest. You see each other's play. It talks about the result of the hole in match, how you win a hole, how you tie a hole, et cetera, how you win a match. So if your match is tied after the final hole, we extend the match in GAM tournaments. You win a match when your opponent, when you lead your opponent by more holes than what remain to be played. briefly, I want to talk about how we announce scores at the end of, there's always some confusion about the result of a match when sometimes people are questioning whether the match is 2 up or 1 up. And basically when a player makes a concession for the match, at that point, the next stroke for both players is considered conceded. So if you've got player A, if both players, if player A is on the green in 2 and player B is on the green in 3 with about a 7-foot or 10-foot putt left for a 3, if player A putts up to about 2 inches and player B concedes player A's putt, well, player B is already lying 3. No, I'm sorry, he's lying. Player A is 1 up, and he gets conceded a 3. Player 2 is already laying 3. Player B is already laying 3. So if that gets conceded, player's B score for that hole is going to be a 4. So that result of that match is going to be 2 up instead of 1 up. Now, if it's a different situation, if a player gets a conceded putt and the result is a tied hole, the result of the match could be remain 1 up instead of going to 2 up. I'm not sure if I made myself very clear, but at the point of the concession is made, both players, if the match is over, then both players' next stroke are considered conceded, and the result of the match is based on what the resulting score is on that hole that concludes the match. Is that clear enough or not?
It's clear.
Okay. In match play, you're applying the handicaps hole by hole, and the honor is determined at the next tee based on net scores in match play. In match play, it is your responsibility to tell the opponent right away the number of strokes you have taken when asked. You must make the opponent aware as soon as possible after you get a penalty, and you must know the match score. Now, if it is your turn to play and the player asks you how many strokes you've taken, you do not have to answer that after you've made your stroke, but you need to answer correctly how many strokes you've taken before your opponent makes his or her next stroke. In match play, you should protect your own rights and interests under the rules. So you need to know and believe your opponent has breached the rule in a penalty, and you may act on the breach, or you can choose to ignore it. So if your opponent is over there taking practice strokes in the bunker, you can ignore it. It would be a problem if you went up to your opponent and say, I'm going to ignore that rule, and advise him that he broke the rule, and you're going to ignore it, because then you're acknowledging that you're ignoring the rule, and both players would be disqualified. But and that gets to the next point, if you and your opponent deliberately agree to ignore a breach that you both now know about, you are both disqualified. Now, later on during the course of that match, you may change your mind and call a penalty on that same player for grounding his club in a bunker. Because you've ignored it once does not mean you have to ignore it the entire round. So yeah, match play is different. It's kind of unique. It's fun to be a part of a walking referee with a match. And you get to be present with players, and you pretty much are up close and personal to what's going on out there. It's a pretty interesting round for most referees. Stroke play itself has specific rules, particularly for scorecards and holing out. You compete against all other players in the competition, and all players need to be treated equally under the rules. I'm not going to go too much about scoring into stroke play. you are at a scoring table and you need to know more about this area about the scoring in stroke play.
Craig? Craig,
Yeah, go ahead.
answer Dan's question.
Go ahead, Nick.
Answer Dan's question on the chat.
Get up here. Can't find the chat here, Ted. Where's the chat? Oh, the first one. Okay, Dan has a question here. After teeing off on the next hole, that would have been a penalty. After you tee off on the next hole, you stay to your opponent. That would have been a penalty. It's not an agreement. Am I right? In other words, Dan, you're saying that you haven't agreed to breach the rules?
Mhm.
Got
a problem.
I would think because I don't think that would be an agreement to breach the rules. I think you may be warning the player in the future that that he should be more aware of that. He cannot do that.
Craig, this is Kyle. So I agree with that. I think it's also just important for everyone to understand, like when we talked about that match play and we're talking about, ignoring rules and stuff like that, we're talking about you playing as a golfer, not you as a referee. So when we were talking about that, a lot of what we were talking about was you as a golfer. So if a golfer ignores a breach of the rules, they can tell their person they're playing against, saying, "Hey, that was a rule." But for a referee, that's different. A referee needs to act on that.
When you are a referee, if you're assigned a match if you've been assigned to a match as a referee, you need to call a rules breach when you observe one or when you are informed of one. In many cases, we have referees that are assigned to multiple matches, and then in that case, you should not step in. There are only certain conditions you would step in and get involved in a match. Okay.
Craig, Kyle, this is Bill. Just so I'm clear, Kyle, did you just say that if I'm a player in a match and I see my opponent commit a breach, all right, and they don't call it on themselves, I can ignore it as their opponent and not have anything come back to me?
Yes, that's correct. You can. That's correct, Bill.
I can ignore it. All right. But as a rules official, Craig, you said I don't have that option.
As the rules official, if you've been assigned to that match, you do not have that option. You must call that breach.
All right.
Another Chris has a question. Even in match play, isn't a player who grounds his club in a sand bunker mandated to call the penalty on him or herself? Well, that's correct, Chris. It's interesting that in the rules we say players must know the rules, and yet we know that many of them do not know the rules. So if a player is not aware that grounding the club in a bunker, and that might be the case in several of our junior tournaments, they will not call a penalty on themselves, and it may not come to light until even after the player has turned his or her scorecard in. In that case, if it does come to light and the competition is still going on, the player would be assessed a general penalty for that, but it would not be disqualified because the player did not know that he or she breached the rule. Okay. All right. So continuing on with the responsibilities of stroke play. These are all scoring issues, and if you work a lot of scoring tents, scoring areas. A lot of text messages here. I'm not. Okay, we're going to keep moving on here. If you work a scoring area, I encourage you to go through section 3.3 3B, because it talks a lot about scenarios that people are required to, how they're into the scores, how scores are accepted, how to handle wrong scores for hole. And it's pretty detailed on what you need to do for players and scoring. The last item in scoring is failure to hold out in scoring in your round. If you fail to do so, you must correct that mistake before making a stroke to begin another hole, or if it's your final hole, or is it a final hole of the round, before returning your scorecard. Otherwise, if that is not corrected, if that mistake is not corrected, that player is disqualified. So if you see a player without a score on the last hole, or walking off any hole without failure to hole out, you do need to step in as soon as possible and stop that player from teeing off on the next hole. And trust me, it's happened enough where we have been able to stop players from doing that. It's still surprising that players have not finished the hole by holding out.
Hey, Craig, let's
Yes.
give an example of that where, I miss a 1 foot putt on a hole. The ball's 2 inches from the hole and I smacked the ball off the green and because I'm mad. So I was putting for par. I missed it. Now I smacked the ball. I haven't holed out yet. What do I do?
If a player is mad that he missed his putt, say he missed a 6-inch putt and he balls on the lip, he smacks it away. There's an interpretation for that, or somewhere there's a clarification on that. That is not considered a stroke. Okay, it's gonna cost the player 1 stroke for moving his ball, but that player must go back and retrieve that ball if retrievable. If it's not easily retrievable, that could be a problem. If it's not retrievable, I'm not sure that could be a problem. You may have to also be penalized for substituting the ball.
Right.
But in any case, that is not it's not considered a stroke. The player must retrieve the ball, put it back where it was, and finish the hole by holding out.
So with a 1 stroke penalty.
The 1 stroke penalty, yes.
Okay.
So you're saying regardless of whether the player smashes the ball away or just scoops it up with the back of his putter, the ball still gets replaced on the spot that it came to rest with the 1 stroke penalty?
Correct, yes.
Correct. Thank you.
Want to go back over the scenario where we talk about referees helping out players or not? Lee, you want to clarify that again? Is there still an issue on that?
I don't think there's an issue in match play referees' role. I think it's important, again, especially if we have people that are newer to volunteering and refereeing, that either as a starter or anytime you come in contact with players, especially younger players, that we remind the markers that it's their responsibility to call breaches on their competitors. They're the ones that are protecting the field. And I think sometimes that responsibility is not one that they take very seriously, or they don't understand it, or they don't want to get in the middle of a confrontation. And sometimes then you end up with parents trying to intercede and a few other things. So I guess it just as a cautionary comment, I would add that.
Okay, thank you, Lee.
Craig, I had a question, back to the concession, not back to the question about the player knocking his ball away before making it, not even attempting a stroke. He did it in anger. Were you referring to match play or stroke play? Because in match play, I believe that's determined as a concession.
Well, no, I don't, stroke play is definitely not considered a stroke, and you'd have to retrieve the ball and hold out.
Correct.
Now in match play, if the player is sitting there a couple inches away from the hole and your opponent does not concede that putt and you do the same thing, I think the same thing would apply. It would still be a one-stroke penalty and you'd have to replace the ball. And then at that point, the opponent probably should say, that's good.
So why in Rule 3.2B, under concessions, does it say, player may concede the opponent's next stroke, a hole or the match, and he can do it by knocking his ball out, just hitting his ball off of the green. And that's a concession. That's a construed as a concession.
That's not the player doing that. That's the opponent knocking the player's ball away. So
That still would be a concession to him, wouldn't it?
Okay, so and as you're saying that if player B's putt is left 1 inch away from the hole, player B can knock the putt away, and that would be considered a concession. Is that what you're saying?
No, the opposite.
You can't concede your own.
You can't concede yourself, your own
Right.
shot.
Right.
Correct, you can't. So run your question by me again on this.
Well, I was listening to the discussion prior, and it seemed like you determined that once the player in match play knocked his ball away, his opponent's ball away from the hole, that it was that he could replace it and do it over again, but he can't.
Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe I confused everyone. Yeah, you can knock your opponent's ball away, and that's considered a concession, but you cannot knock your own ball away. Okay, you cannot knock your own ball away from the hole. That's not considered a stroke. Okay, are we clear on that?
You're gonna get a stroke, but the hole is already determined, isn't it?
No,
Well,
in
may or may
the
not be.
example, Craig, in the example, we were only talking about stroke play. So, and
Okay.
when I was talking about it, it was myself that missed the putt and I knocked the ball away, not
right.
my opponent, it wasn't in match play. In match play, if I missed that putt and my opponent did not give me that putt and I knocked it away, now I have to retrieve it, put it back and knock it in. But if I missed it and then he said, that's good, then I could pick it up even if I smacked it away in match play.
We all good now? I wanted to talk a little bit about,
Craig,
go ahead.
not
Yes.
to belabor this, but what if you and I are playing and in a match and you put up into 6 inches or whatever, then go up there and swipe your ball away. I know the rule that you should replace it, but what if I say you got to go play it from where it landed?
Well, in match play, if there's a referee on site, I hope the referee would make the right call and have that player say, no, does not have to be played from there. The player with a one-stroke penalty gets to replace it. Now, if the player knows the rule, he's going to take the same action. Now, if the player doesn't know the rule and he agrees to do that, then it's like any other action when there's a match between two players. They could agree to settle something incorrectly, but that incorrect settling is going to stand as the match proceeds. I mean, they can settle something incorrectly, and that's the way it's going to be.
Right, but if I purposefully gave him the wrong information, then aren't I going to be penalized? If I know that you should replace the ball, but I say, no, Craig, you got to go play it out of that bunker, or you got to go play it out of that penalty area, and somehow that gets uncovered. I don't know how it would be, but I guess
Wrong information pertains to strokes only.
stroke play only.
I guess that might be covered under a different rule for etiquette, perhaps, if you're trying to give someone wrong information, right? Or
Right.
Yeah.
not wrong information, but wrong.
Yeah.
John, go ahead.
The information rule is in match play only, and it applies to the number of strokes taken. That's what Mars was trying to say.
But to Lee's point, if someone knowingly gave wrong information, that might be considered under a different rules violation for maybe etiquette or something. I mean, that would have to be taken up by the rules.
Yeah.
Contact?
That's correct, but that's correct, but it gets back to this whole idea that players are responsible to know the rules.
I agree. But
Craig,
again,
I think it just means that Lee's a masshole. But there's no penalty for it, for that. And let the players, like this being said, the players need to know the rules. And if they think it's wrong, then they can make a claim.
It doesn't necessarily make me unique in GAM tournaments,
Yeah, I agree with that.
Craig, this is Phil.
go ahead.
Are you referring, when you're saying a player smacks the ball away from the hole in frustration, that he can replace it back there with no penalty for that stroke, get a 1-stroke penalty for moving the ball, but he has to put it in, correct?
Yes, I'm saying the stroke is not considered a stroke. It's considered a player moving his ball at rest. That's a 1-stroke penalty and he must replace it.
Okay, does that apply in the fairway also?
Any place.
Yeah, anywhere.
Yeah, but in the fairway, if a player swings at a ball and he misses it by 4 inches and gets frustrated and strikes that ball and it moves 10 feet, is he entitled to bring it back? Or does he have to play the ball from where it's at?
Well, you'd have to define, a stroke is you want to go look, let's look at the definition of a stroke then, okay?
Really? Guys, I gotta go.
You'd have to ask that player whether his intention of moving that club was made to strike the ball in terms of, it sounds like if his intention was to move the club towards the hole, technically you might be able to call it a stroke. I don't think I would. I don't know. If it's an accidental movement, just like a player taking a practice swing out in the fairway, if he were to accidentally strike the ball and move the ball 10 feet, it's not considered a stroke. The ball would have to be replaced.
Okay.
Right? I wanted to briefly talk about the format, some of the formats of play we have in GAM. We have team or partner competitions, either 4-ball or foursome. And there's separate rule numbers that cover those, 22 and 23. 22 covers foursomes, otherwise known as alternate shot, and 23 covers 4-ball. If you are volunteering to work at one of those formatted tournaments with partners, you need to become acutely aware of some of the unique differences in that partner format. Partners are uniquely able to take any action the player, him or herself, is able to take. I find it interesting that even in such as you've got a player, say, who does not hit his or her woods at all. This player carries 14 irons, but he or she partners up with another player who has, a 48-inch driver. In taking relief from the penalty area, and if that player, without any driver in his or her bag, wants to get maximum space from that penalty area, edge of the penalty area, that player can use his or her partner's club 48-inch driver to measure out the relief area. Found that kind of interesting. Pardon me?
You can't. Because unless they're combined total between the two players is 14 clubs. If one player has 14 clubs and one player has other clubs, they cannot use a partner's club.
You're not using it to play, you're using it to get relief. There is a clarification on that, Marv. You're wrong.
It is, where is it? No, never, don't bother. I'll look.
I'll find it at some point and I'll let you know, but
No, yeah,
it's
not
a
right
unique
now.
situation. So if you see that happening, it's kind of interesting that they allow that.
Yeah, don't look at it now, just keep going.
Keep going.
Look at it later. Yep.
We're going to go now to rule number 4, which is players' equipment, which is, and you may have seen something that the USGA and RNA have put out recently, just yesterday, I believe. It looks like they've been studying this for quite a while, and they made an announcement yesterday that they're going to seriously study it. And it sounds like they have going to do eventually make some changes to maybe possibly club length or possibly the ball dimensions or ball configuration somehow, and try to restrict the distance that players today are getting off their equipment. And part of this, and hopefully part of this, they may try to mandate by use of a local rule, which I don't envision GAM imploring such local rules to restrict equipment. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but it's interesting that there are some serious things taking place to change the requirements of players' equipment to try to cut back on the distances these players are hitting the ball. So rule number 4 covers equipment that you may use during your round. And it's based on the principle that golf is a challenging game, and depending on your judgment and skills, you must use conforming clubs and balls. Very important. You are limited to no more than 14 clubs, and normally must not replace damaged or lost clubs. We'll get into that. That's been changed, somewhat significantly changed. And they also restrict in the use of other equipment that gives artificial help to your play. So 4.1 is clubs, and clubs that are allowed in making a stroke. You must use a club that conforms to the requirements in the USGA equipment rules. They've got some place on their website where they go through the equipment rules. If you want to go through that, you can at some point. They talk about club length, the length of the club, conforming measurements, the grip, etc., shapes, all kinds of different requirements for the various clubs that are going to be in a player's bag. If your club is damaged during your round or while play is stopped, you may continue to make strokes with that damaged club for the rest of the round, or have the club repaired by restoring it as nearly as possible to its condition before the damage has happened. Let me okay, so there's a limit on 14 clubs, and as Marv mentioned, if you are playing with a partner, you are limited to 14 clubs between the two of you. You cannot share or add or replace clubs during the round, with a major exception. We'll get to that. So if you start a round with fewer than 14 clubs, you may add clubs during the round up to the 14 club limit. When you become aware that you are in breach of the rule by having more than 14 clubs, you must immediately take the excess club out of play using the procedure in Rule 4.1c. 4.1c, here's the procedure on taking a club out of play. When you become aware during the round you have 14 clubs, you wait a minute. You must take an action that clearly indicates each club you are taking out of play, such as advising another player or turning the club upside down in your bag. This is during the round. Now, if a player comes to the starting tee and has more than 14 clubs, we would encourage that player to leave that extra club or extra clubs with the starter that they could pick up later on at the end of their round. we would have that for them back in the scoring area. But they wouldn't be required to take it out of play or leave it there. They would need to take some necessary actions to declare it out of play in some obvious way so that it would not be used, such as putting it somewhere else in their cart or turning it upside down.
Question.
Now, in the GA talked about, we may as well get to the local rule. It's not in your big book because it was added after the big book was printed. GAM has model local rule G9 in effect for all of its tournaments. It's on our hard card where it talks about replacing a broken club or damaged club. And G9 says that a player's club is broken or significantly damaged during the round by a player or caddy. The player may replace the club with any club under Rule 401B, parentheses 4. That is the case in all cases except in cases of abuse. When replacing a club, the player must immediately take the broken or significantly damaged club out of play using the procedure in Rule 401C. 1.2 about taking, if you start with excess number of clubs, say you started with 15 clubs and you have to take one out, and you later on damage a club, you cannot replace the damaged club with that club you've taken out of play due to being an excess club. That is not a club that you can replace with. But it is important to know that we have local rule G9 in place for all of the USGA, for all of our GAM tournaments. And I believe the USGA has the same local rule in effect for all the USGA tournaments. And it's spelled out quite clearly on the GAM hard card.
Hey, Craig, where is that in the big book, G9? Because mine stops at G8.
It's
Under model
clarification.
local rules.
Yeah, it's not in the big book. It's a clarification. It was made after, I'm not sure when it was exactly made. Let's see.
Go into the committee of modified local rules.
It was made on April of 2019.
Hey, Craig.
It's in the clarification. It's in the USGA clarifications document. It's under the local rules back there.
Craig.
Yeah.
It is available in the app. You can see it in the app.
Okay.
Craig, question.
Now that's this is important to know that the damage has to occur during the round. So if a player has a club damage before the round, that club cannot be replaced. And if it's damaged significantly, well, it cannot be replaced if the player started the round with that club. Question, Marv? Somebody have a question?
I did. This is Doug.
Doug.
If just in practical terms, they tee off, guy gets the second hole and busts the head of his driver, damaged, can't repair it, cannot replace it.
Under local rule G9, you can replace that club.
And how would it get? My question then becomes how. Let's say you've got a parent says, "Well, I've got the other one in the car. Your other one, I'll run and get it."
Yep.
Okay.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. As long as the player can be part of the requirement of the rule is you can replace a club as long as you don't, undue delay of play.
Thank you.
What's interesting about that local rule G9?
You're not gonna let a player go get his club out of the car.
No,
He
a parent
can
was going to
send
do that.
somebody else to get it.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry. Did Doug say Doug said you can go get the club out of the car. You cannot undo delay. Like a parent would have to go get the club.
Any outside agent.
Right.
Or the caddy. Caddy could leave.
Craig, one of the big questions we always get is with the drivers today, when they become loose, everyone should know that you are allowed to retighten that head, but you cannot change the loft of that driver during the round.
The, as the clubs are, as the player starts the round, the specifications of those clubs have been established at the start of the round. So during the course of the round, if the club gets changed, something other than how it was when the round was started, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a rules violation. You need to have that if so, but if a club does, if club gets loosened or the club gets its, if the club gets altered, you can restore it back to its original condition. Now, if a player changes the club to a different configuration, the player can restore it to the original state as long as he doesn't make a stroke with that club, given the changed characteristics. So if a player wants to changes the loft of a club, say between holes, and he hasn't used it, that's going to be okay as long as the player doesn't make a stroke at it and changes it back before his next stroke with that club. Okay.
I've had that, if I could ask a question, I've had this happen. How do you assure, or what steps can you take to assure that it's being retightened, as Dan suggested, at the same loft? Would you ask them what loft did you have it in before you retighten it, or what do you do?
Well, if someone's there, I guess they can ask. I mean, you know, a lot of these scenarios based on golf being a game of honor and integrity, right, Doug? So I mean, you can only do so much as you're out there as an official. Hopefully, players, if you do find out after the fact, there's going to be a problem. But if you can't be everywhere at all places, right?
Agreed. We talked about limiting clubs to 14. Clubs you cannot share clubs. If you find it, say for by accident you use a club that's not yours and you thought it was yours, that's going to be a rules violation. Penalty applies.
Craig?
Yeah.
This is Liz. I found your clarification on using a partner's club to measure club length. It's in the USGA clarification. It was added December of 2018 and briefly states, in partner forms of play, either partner's longest club, except for the putter, may be used to define the teeing area or determine the size of a relief area.
Thanks, Liz.
Uh-huh.
Thank
Send
you.
it to Marvin.
Where's that? What's the clarification is that?
It's under club length on the USGA clarifications list.
Okay.
It's a clarification to the definition, in other words.
When playing a hole, the breach of the penalty is based on when you become aware of the breach for excessive clubs. While playing the hole, the penalty is applied at the end of the hole you are playing. Now, in match play, this is not a loss of hole penalty when players have excess clubs in their bag. This is the only remaining penalty that is a match play adjustment penalty. So if this does happen during a course of a play of a hole in a match, the player cannot claim loss of hole. The hole is played out, the hole is completed. And after the completed hole, the result of that hole stands, then the match score is adjusted by the penalty based on the amount of holes that the player was carrying the excessive club. If it's one hole, you're going to have just it's a one hole adjustment. If it's more than one hole, the maximum hole adjustment is going to be 2. But that is not a loss of hole penalty in match play for carrying excessive clubs. It's a match play adjustment penalty. So the hole gets finished and then you apply the penalties, okay?
This John Allen, one thing I would tell ROs if they encounter that situation, particularly if it's before the hole is completed on the same hole where the extra club is discovered, remind the player not to concede that hole. wait till it's over and the adjustment takes place then. Twice in national championships, I had people walk first fairway, find out they had an extra wedge, and they concede the hole before they get to the green. And then suddenly after the first hole, they're 2 down when you add it all up. And so it's better to warn the player not to concede, wait until the end of the hole.
Good point, John. Thanks. So here's an example in here. If you started with 15 clubs and you become aware of the breach while playing the 3rd hole, and then you win that hole to go 3 up in the match, the maximum adjustment of 2 holes is applied and you would now be 1 up in the match. Now the penalty in stroke play is two penalty strokes, maximum of 4 strokes. You get the general penalty for each hole where the breaches have happened, with a maximum of 4 penalty strokes. So if you've played 2 holes and you have not yet teed off on the 3rd, you're going to get a 4-stroke penalty. If you've played only 1 hole and you haven't teed off on the 2nd hole, it's going to be just 2-stroke penalty. But anything more than once you've teed off and started playing that 2nd hole, you're going to get the maximum of 4 penalty strokes added to your score. That score gets added to each of the first 2 holes. Okay, we talked about taking the club out of play, what procedure you need to take. Any other questions on clubs? Let's see here. Did we cover everything on clubs?
Craig, I have a question.
Go ahead, Bill.
Craig, you said earlier that a player who has a damaged club during the round cannot replace that club with a club they had to take out of play because it was an excess club. Why is that?
Right.
Why couldn't they not put that club back in play if they took one out? Replace the damaged club.
You know what? I'm not sure why that is. I can't tell you a reason why. That's just the way the rules state.
Okay.
USGA has a lot of, sometimes the penalty does not always meet the, sometimes the penalty does not always beat the crime, right? It doesn't match the crime necessarily. But that's what the rule states, Bill.
Okay, thanks, Craig.
Again, if you see a player, or we've had cases where we've had to even take pictures of clubs and send them to the USGA to determine whether or not they're conforming or not. We've had players ask if a club is conforming, and if it's not on the conforming list, I would urge that we probably would be on the caution side and not allow the player to use that club if it's not on the approved list. Now, sometimes if the player can point to an older version of the club list and it hasn't been advanced forward, I think we could assume that the player, that club would continue to be conforming if it was on an earlier list. If he knows it was on an earlier list and can prove that back in a year ago it was on the conforming list, but it's not on the current list, I think we could probably be safe to say that club is still conforming. But generally, we need to err on the side of caution there.
Hey, Craig, it's Leroy.
Yeah, Leroy.
Our clubs, the clubs, are clubs grandfathered if they're old enough? For instance, I play with Ping I2s, probably 25 years old. Are those still considered conforming?
I think they still, I'm not an equipment expert. I think they still are, right? I mean, at some point they were talking about, banning those because of the square grooves, right?
Yeah, they still have the square grooves, but
that was so long ago.
I think just the wedges are, I think some of the wedges still are. But I'm not sure about the rest of the clubs.
Some of the wedges used to have a red marker on them versus gold. I think the red meaning they were not conforming, and at some point they were going to take them and make them non-conforming, but I don't know that they ever officially made them non-conforming. Dan, I don't know exactly. I can't really.
So they would be considered grandfathered?
We can take that question up and see what we can get back to you on that, Leroy, okay?
Okay, thanks.
Well, this is John Allen. It's also complicated by the fact that the grandfathering arose out of the settlement of a federal antitrust suit. So there's a court order that covers it too. I believe that the PGA Tour was permitted to make a separate rule. Theirs, I think the grandfathering expired after a period of time. I don't know how long. But I don't know where the USGA stands on it. It's also, by the way, when they talk about equipment rules, they want it done by local rule because of the problem with that Ping lawsuit. USGA gets into the business of banning certain clubs or club design to find itself in the same position again. And it just about lost that lawsuit to Karsten Solheim. I mean, they were in bad shape on that. That's why they agreed to grandfather, and John Solheim sort of came in and persuaded his father to do it.
That's similar why they never banned long putters. They just allowed you to use it, just not anchor it. They didn't want to ban the equipment.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, we're going to move on to balls. 4.2 balls played in and around. Again, balls must be conforming. And in the starters box, we have a list of conforming balls, a list of standard balls that players must be using. If a ball is not, if a player uses that ball that is not conforming, the penalty for making a stroke in using that ball is going to be a disqualification. I'm happy to announce that the GAM one ball rule is been modified this year under our hard card. The one ball rule that we have on our local rule G3, it's a local rule requiring one ball rule. It's only going to be restricted to the Michigan Amateur and Michigan Amateur qualifiers, the GAM Championship and GAM qualifiers, and the GAM Women's Championships. So those are the only balls, those are the only competitions where a one ball rule will be in effect. And I'm willing to bet that those players that play in those tournaments don't even know what the one ball rule means, in the sense that I noticed where Titleist is coming out with some new logoing for their Pro V1 and Pro V1X, I think, this year. So they'll be changing the construction of that ball somewhat. And in effect, what they're doing is making those new balls a single line item on the USGA conforming ball list. And in consideration of a one ball rule, every line on that USGA list is considered one ball. So in other words, if you've got a Pro V1X from 2019 and you switch to if you switch to a Pro V1X, say from 2000 to 2012, you've in effect broken the one ball rule, because those balls are separate line items on the USGA ball list. Similar if a player were to play a Pro V1X from one year and in the same year and play a Pro V1X yellow ball from the same year, that again is not, that would be in violation of the one ball rule, and the player would be in breach of that rule and would get a 2-stroke penalty for every hole where that non-one ball rule, where that non-one ball was used. So I personally never want to get too close to any player's balls and have them and get too knowledgeable about what ball they're using, because I would be worried that we'd have a lot of rules violations for players breaking that rule.
Craig, just to clarify, it's I just want to double check too. So it's the men's AM, the men's GAM championship, the women's AM, and the women's GAM championship, correct? Just those 4 events?
And all stages of those events.
And all stages, qualifiers. Yeah.
Qualifiers, okay. Yeah. So that is a change to the hard card that all starters should be aware of. It's going to make life a little simpler, and maybe one day we'll eliminate the one ball rule altogether. So we talked about balls allowed during the course of play. Breach is disqualification. If a player breaks a ball 4-2B, if a ball breaks into pieces while playing a hole, which I've never seen happen, that is not considered a stroke, or that stroke does not count. There's no penalty and the stroke does not count. The player must play another ball from where the stroke was made. See Rule 14.6, okay? So that's just so if that were to happen, you know that that is not considered a stroke and it's not a penalty. The player replays with a different ball from that same location. If a ball becomes cut or cracked while playing a hole, there is a procedure on how to examine that. It's the same procedure, more or less, for an embedded ball. The player is allowed to mark the ball and examine it, but he must first mark the spot of the ball and then lift it without it cleaning. And in this case, you're not even really required to show it to your fellow competitors or fellow players. But I'm sure if you're playing a match play, the opponent would want to know what's going on. But you can substitute another ball by replacing it on the original spot if it's clearly seen that the ball is cut or cracked. Now, this damage does not include a ball scraped or say hit a cart path. If it's discolored or scratched or scraped, that is not considered damage and it is not considered to be replaceable. If a player incorrectly substitutes a ball while playing a hole or playing from a wrong place in a breach of a rule, that's going to be the general penalty. All right.
So the player must show the ball to his opponent.
Well, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. But I think the opponent would want to know what's going on. I mean, if you're there as a referee, you'd want to be involved in that. You'd want to show it to the player's opponent as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Any situation where you've got like an embedded ball, you'd want to be involved in that, and you want to be clearly explaining to the opponent what's going on. I don't think you would necessarily need to show the opponent the hole that the ball is made. I mean, I think he would have to trust your judgment that you have granted free relief to the player because the ball is embedded, or in the case of a cracked or cut ball, that he would have to trust that you're making that judgment, correctly.
Yes, thank you.
4.3a talks about allowed and prohibited uses of equipment. You may use equipment to help you play during your round, except you must not create a potential advantage by using equipment other than a club or ball that is artificially eliminates or reduces the need for a skill or a judgment that is essentially to the challenge of the game, or using equipment, including a club or ball, in an abnormal way in making your stroke. Abnormal way means in a way that is fundamentally different than is intended and is not normally recognized as part of the playing game. There are situations where, remember Julie, what's her name? Julie
Inkster.
Pardon me? Who's the player who's using a swing weighted club in an LPGA tournament? Julie, was it? Yeah, maybe was it Julie Inkster? Julie Inkster. She was waiting to play off the tee or someplace. She was waiting. Play was backed up a little bit, and she took out her weighted club and she started swinging it. And during the round, that is not allowed to be using equipment in that fashion. And a general penalty was assessed to her for doing that. And you can take a couple clubs and swing a club and practice some swings, because you're using the club in its normal way, and that is not going to be a problem in taking a practice swing with more than one club in your hand. Oftentimes you'll see players throwing up grass to determine the wind direction, certainly allowable. It's a natural object, but players cannot use any artificial objects such as baby powder or strings or anything that's artificial that would eliminate the need, or that would be giving them the wind direction. You're using an artificial object, and you're not allowed to do that. That would be a rules violation. There are lots of interpretations and clarifications on that. So you should read through that rules book and become familiar with some of those different clarifications in regards to the use of artificial and equipment. Now, oftentimes you see players carrying around those alignment sticks. You know, if a player were to pull that out and use that to align themselves, they cannot absolve themselves of a penalty, even if they have not taken their stance yet. They cannot say back away and be absolved from a general breach or general penalty. They have been in breach of a rule. Now, a player is allowed to take their club head and stand behind the ball and place the club head down and align the club head in alignment direction where they intend to hit the ball, and then walk around and play and take their stance. And that is entirely permissible under the rules. Definitely got. You have a power cord for this? I'm running out of juice here on my laptop.
Craig, they can't take those alignment sticks and swing them either, can they?
No, you can't take an alignment sticks. You know what? I didn't bring my power cord.
How much time you got?
I got 9 minutes left. We're gonna be
It's a Delta, isn't it?
you want to bring fire up your lap? Is that a?
It's Dell.
Hold on a second. We're making some adjustments here. Perfect.
Craig, I'll take the floor for a minute here. While you're.
Okay, Kyle, go ahead. Thanks.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I wanted to go over on Rule 3 when we're talking about scoring. So when you're doing a match, you're the person that's going to be keeping score. So when we have a referee assigned to a match, we do not give the players a scorecard. You're responsible for keeping the score and announcing it at the end of each hole. And then when you do go out there, I think Barry's gone, so I can say this, but if you're ever out there and you're learning from Barry, don't listen to him when he announces the match at the end of the hole. But what you want to say is you want to say, you know, player 1, Mr. Anderson, 4, Mr. Wolf, 5, Mr. Anderson is 1 up. And that's how you want to end the hole as you're walking off. You want to announce it so the players know. And then in stroke play, it's a little different, right? So in stroke play, we give the players a scorecard, or they keep score through our mobile device that we have, or our mobile app that we use, and they're responsible for putting the scores in and making sure that each hole has a score. The players don't need to do the math. As most of you know, we do the math, or the computer will do the math, but they do need to have a score in each of the 18 boxes if it's an 18-hole event. And then they also need to sign it, and then their marker needs to sign as well. And that's kind of pre-COVID. There's some adjustments that we made because of COVID and that process. But at the end of the day, in stroke play, players are responsible for making sure that there's a score in each hole, and they don't need to worry about the total. And then the other thing when it comes to scoring that's common for a lot of people, especially trouble hole referees, is when we have someone withdraw mid round, someone quit because they're injured or they got a phone call from work and they got to leave. So when that happens, we need to do a few things, or it's usually a good scenario when we do a few things. We need that person that's leaving to sign the card that they're keeping score of, or verify the scores that have been put in. And then we need to give that card to someone else in the group to keep score for the remainder of the round. So obviously if it's like an emergency and someone's, bleeding, we're not going to stop them from going to the hospital or getting care because they have to sign a scorecard. But if that does happen, which it does happen quite a bit, we want to make sure that anyone that kept score on a scorecard signs that score card. So I guess that's all I have for scoring, Craig. I'll turn it back over to you unless anyone has any questions.
You should also have it. you should also have that partial marker mark what holes they scored for.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion, Marv.
Hey, Kyle,
Yeah.
one question, this business about the one ball rule, is there going to be a notification about the new Pro V1s and Pro V1Xs and non-compatibility with the old ones for the elite players? Because I'm going to guess that some may not know that and may feel that they can change. They may only have a couple of those balls with them.
So I missed that part of the conversation, but my understanding is that it's always been that way. A new model has always been a new model, and that they've always been in breach. So I don't know if we'll do any extra communicating on that. I think as Craig, maybe I caught the end of it, but as Craig's pointed out, I mean, I think if you were to take in those 4 events that we're going to allow the one ball rule, there's probably 1,000 players that compete, or like maybe 1,000 players that compete in those. I guarantee at least 300 one ball rule. So I don't know, Craig, if you have anything else to say to that, but
I don't know that we should do anything special to try to inform players. I mean, the rules, it's always been in place that way, Dr. Hicks, where players should be aware that different marking on a ball, different how Titleist marks their balls with a different shade of gray or different kind of arrow, pretty much states that that's not the same as a one ball across the entire line of Pro V1Xs. So the same thing will probably change this year. They'll probably change the way that ball looks to them, and they should know, based on our one ball rule, that that's now a new one ball, and they can't go back and forth between different types. I don't think we should do anything special on that.
But we should be either emphasizing on the starter should be emphasizing on those events that are one ball rules, or it certainly should be highlighted in our whole location sheet that this is a one ball rule event. You know, if we're telling them for the senior match play, it's not a one ball event, but it is if you go to the Michigan Amateur qualifier, you better make sure you clarify that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we do require that the request that the starters include that local rule, or that local in that competition, that it is a one ball tournament. I think we typically would do that, don't we, Doug? Doug, you still on the call?
Greg, it is on our local rule sheet, but it's not real clear. It gives like all the different tournaments and says then except for, I think we ought to put something on our website with the new one ball rule. Is just like a little notification so people maybe go in and read it and start to become more familiar with it.
Craig, I have a question.
Go ahead, Robert.
So if I'm on hole number 3 at Forest Acres West, how do I really enforce a one ball rule? I mean, how do I go about making sure that somebody is playing the ball that they are supposed to play?
Robert, if I were on trouble hole number 3 and I saw players playing down a fairway, I wouldn't be concerned about what ball they were playing unless someone points out to you that one of the players started with a yellow ball and now switched to a white ball. And we're playing a one ball tournament. You need to clarify what has happened, and you need to point out that player has committed a rules breach, and you can tell that player he's got to go back to play the ball that he originally started with, because every other hole that he played with the non-one ball is going to be a two-stroke penalty assessed.
Yeah. Well, so basically, unless somebody brings it to my attention, it's not something that I'm going to worry about.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Also, there's one interpretation or one interpretation under balls as well I want to point out. We often get asked this question: X out refurbished balls and practice balls. Can a player play them or not? Well, because GAM, if you look down here at however, because GAM has adopted a list of conforming golf balls as a local rule, the X out ball and the refurbished balls are not allowed to be played. However, a practice ball are typically conforming that have been stamped, practiced with a similar stamping practice balls are treated in the same way as golf balls that feature, say, a golf club or course or company or other logos. So those balls can be played, and they have been adopted to be on the list of conforming golf balls as a local rule. So XL balls and refurbished balls are not allowed to be played in GAM tournaments because of our local rule, but practice balls can be played. Okay.
Craig, and that's practice.
You take out the chicken and the
nice
flatbread, please.
Pardon me?
That's nice practice balls, like ones that you would see at like a PGA tournament, not one that you're going to grab from the range at Whispering Willows. Those are not allowed, correct?
Well, they don't. Do they say practice or do they say range?
Some of them say practice.
Some of them say practice, some of them say range. But I think I just want to clarify that when you talk about a practice ball, it's like a really, really nice one, like a Titleist that has practice on the side.
Yeah, it's got to be good. It's a good point, Kyle. They'd have to be stamped similar to another conforming ball. Yeah, we'd be on the conforming ball list.
So if I've got a big black stripe on my ball, I can't play it, but if somebody's got practice written on it, they can.
Big black
Right.
stripe.
Practice ball is a practice ball. How are you trying to define that one?
Say Titleist Pro V1 on it in addition to the black stripe?
Well, it probably could be. I don't know. Where does it say that a practice ball, there's a definition of what a practice ball is?
Well, they're stamped practice. If it's not stamped
so
practice,
and the ones that with the black stripe around them that I hit at Carl's or wherever else I might be practicing, I don't know. I haven't looked at them that closely. I know they've got black stripes on them. I don't know if they say practice though. What's the difference? You're just saying because it has the word practice on it?
Lee, look at page 64 in your guide, and you can see how they define practice. But it's not a range, like Craig was trying to say. It's not a range ball. It's a practice ball. And I'm sure you've seen them before at Oakland Hills when they had their big events there. They're very different than the balls at Carl's.
Yes, I understand that, but I'm just trying to define or understand how we're defining it. So page 64, you said?
Yeah, 64.
In the regular rules book?
the big book.
In the guide.
Guide, yeah.
Yeah, the big
book. Yeah, the official guide to the rules golf.
Okay.
Have we ever had anybody show up at one of our tournaments playing a practice ball? Has anybody?
We have,
noticed
yes.
that?
Yeah, we have.
Wow.
We've had players ask us if they can play X outs too.
Yeesh.
Yeah. So 4.2a. Dan, as you're going down, there is no penalty for playing a non-conforming ball if the stroke is discarded. So for example, if a player plays a non-one ball, plays a different ball in a one ball tournament as a provisional ball, if that provisional ball does not come into play, then there's not going to be a problem. However, there would be a problem if it comes into play during if the player is lost, or if the original ball is lost or out of bounds, and the provisional ball does come into play, then we've got a problem. We talked about getting enough distance and directional information. We allow distance measuring devices, DMDs. You'll often see them abbreviated to DMDs from devices. It used to be the USGA did not allow a device to be used that had enhanced features, even if that enhanced feature was turned off. Now, Any distant measuring device is allowed to be used. And just, we have to make sure that enhanced features such as slope and the other features that are enhanced are turned off and not utilized during the course of the round. Players are allowed to use their smartphones in getting distance. So they've got their distance mapped onto their smartphone, and players are allowed to use their smartphone. But what's not allowed to be used are those devices that measure elevation or interpreting distances or directional information. So players, in paragraph 2, information on wind and other weather conditions, players are allowed to get any type of weather information that is available to them from weather forecast or measuring the temperature and humidity at the course. What's not allowed is measuring wind speed at the course or using an artificial object to get other wind-related information, such as using powder to assess the wind direction. Equipment can be used to gather information. You can use information that was gathered before the round, such as swing tips or club recommendations. Those can be viewed on your on a smartphone, as long as you're not recording things during play. If they're done before the round and you're viewing them, you can view those things. Recordings for use after the round, playing or information from the round can also be utilized after the round. What's not allowed is processing or interpreting playing information from the round, such as club recommendations based on current round distances or using any physiological information recorded during the round.
Hey, Craig,
Yes, sir.
the question about using any physiological information, what about some of these people who carry these smart devices or fit devices that monitor heart rate and so forth? Would that be included in that?
I would think so, unless it's for medical reasons. I mean, there's a whole set of guidelines now that players that they've got some medical, some changes in the medical rule for medical purposes. If a player were to check his heart rate or blood pressure for medical reasons, I think we'd have perhaps because he's a risk, we'd probably want to allow that player to do that so he doesn't have a heart attack or a stroke out on the course. But other than that, I would say that would not be allowed.
I checked that.
Hmm?
I don't, all the players on tour are wearing Whoop wristbands, right?
For what? For measure their heartbeat?
Well, just for health purposes, like a Fitbit. You know, I doubt they're all of them are risks, but a lot of them are.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll check into that. All right, Dr. Hicks, we'll see what's going on there.
Some players use an insulin pump that's allowed.
Pardon me, Marv?
There are some players that they're diabetic, they have an insulin pump like attached to their belt. That's allowed.
Yes. Teddy just mentioned that a lot of the PGA players are wearing these Fitbits. So I'm not sure how they're using that, but well, let me take that and we'll see what we can find out more about that.
Craig?
Yes, Ines.
This is Ines. Have a question. What about these new companies that are invading the market with their drones and they're providing aerial views in real time of the golf courses, hole by hole?
I saw an interpretation or clarification one place where players are not allowed, if the video is being shown somewhere, players are able to view that video. So if you've got a scoreboard, say, for example, where players are playing and they're showing a video of a hole being played by somebody else, players are allowed to watch that video up on that scoreboard. Now, I don't know that we'd ever experienced something like that, but
But they can watch aerial views of a golf course hole by hole if their course has subscribed to that service. Is that true? Or or has that really been?
Well, you're saying they bring it up themselves on their smartphone?
Yes.
Boy, oh boy, you guys.
I believe that is
Craig,
allowed.
I think let's take that call offline. Inez, I'll give you a call on that one so we can discuss that.
Okay.
All right.
I can share that with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll report back for sure.
We'll let you know later.
Thanks. The next section on equipment is gloves and gripping agents, what's allowed. You see that plain gloves are allowed. You can use resin, powders, and other moisturizing drying agents, or you can wrap a towel around the grip to secure your grip better. What's not allowed is to use a grip that does not meet the requirements in the equipment rules. No, I have seen players, and I don't think this is allowed. I don't think you're allowed to like write on your, like draw arrows on your grip, pointing out to where you want your fingers to be. I think that would be a violation of the rule where you take a grip and you add line markings or arrow indicators, like where you want your grip to be. That would not be allowed. That grip would not meet the requirements. It's not manufactured that way, so it would not be allowed. Section 6 talks about stretching devices and other swing aids. You can talk about you can use any equipment for general stretching other than making a practice swing. So you cannot make a practice swing with that kind of equipment for like we talked about with Julie Inkster. Whether the equipment is designed for stretching for use in golf, such as an alignment rod, you can stretch with it, or for any other purpose unrelated to golf, such as rubber tubing or a section of pipe. You can have that, and you can use that for stretching. What's not allowed is to use any kind of golf or training.
Hey, Joel, did you check
training
to
or
see if
swing.
they have food at Birchwood tonight?
Is that a question or not? That's
Almost 12.
you cannot use any golf or swing aid, such as an alignment rod or a weighted head cover as a donut or a non-conforming club to make a practice swing in any way that creates a potential advantage by helping a player preparing to make a stroke. Okay, there's further guidance on equipment rules in the equipment rules section of the USGA. 4.3b talks about equipment for medical reasons. So if a player has a medical reason to use the equipment, it probably should be approved by the committee. The committee should probably be asked to approve any medical devices and give its approval to the player so that it does not give the player any unfair advantage. A player may use tape or adhesive to prevent an injury or to help with an existing injury as long as it is not applied excessively, does not help the player more than necessary for the medical reasons, such as to immobilize a joint. And a player who is uncertain about whether or where the tape can be placed should ask the committee for a ruling on that. The first breach is a general penalty, and any second breach or unrelated to the first breach is going to be a disqualification. And that concludes Rule 4. Any questions about equipment? We covered quite a bit under equipment. These would be equipment rule issues. You would, as a volunteer, as a trouble hole person, you would want to bring the rules committee involved and make sure the rules committee and the head OIC from GAM gets involved in any decision you're going to make about equipment violations, equipment breaches.
Craig?
Yes, sir.
one thing I've run into with the high school events where you have a coach and the weather's cold about deliberately altering the ball. I've had coaches come to me and say the other coach has got a heater in his cart and the girls are warming their balls up. I've gone over there and explained everything to them. And I mean, how do you prove that? And it's not really, is it a breach or not a breach?
Can't use any artificial means, Mike, to heat the golf ball. I mean, you can have the golf ball in your pocket, but you cannot use, say, you cannot intentionally warm a golf ball. For example, if you've got a hand warmer in your pocket and you intentionally place that golf ball in there for the purpose of warming it up, that would be a rules violation. Now, in the case of a coach with I know what you're talking about. In the case with a heater in the cart, and if the girls are intentionally taking the golf ball and putting it directly in front of the heater, I'd say you've got a problem there, and it's going to be a rules violation. Now, if they happen to be over there and just standing next to the heater, it'd be hard to prove that they're intentionally heating their golf ball. But you know, it's one of those intent issues that you get into. Is it accidental or intentional? I guess. Does that help out or not? Does that help?
Yeah, I agree. I just warned the coaches before.
Hey, Craig.
Questions about equipment, Leroy? Yeah.
Yeah, regarding the warm-up aids, using donuts or other devices. Basically, from what I understand, you're saying is these are okay if they're used before the match or the competition starts. Once you start, you cannot use those during the match or during play.
Yes, that's correct too. Yes. Now keep in mind too that in stroke play, the round is going to be 18 holes. In match play, the match gets extended. So we talked about how a stroke play 18-hole format, a player who qualifies for, say, goes into a qualifying playoff situation, that's not considered part of the same round. So a player can, swing away to a club, swing a donut. The player can swap out clubs and exchange clubs. So he didn't like his putter that he was using for the first 18 holes. He can, before the playoff starts, if he wants to run to his car and swap out putters, that's certainly permissible. But in match play, that would not be permissible. You cannot. That match gets extended. They go right to the tee where they probably started their match. Hopefully, usually the holes are played in the same order. The match gets extended, the holes are played in the same order as they were originally. They would not be allowed to change out clubs or to do any practice donut swinging, because that match is still part of the same. That match continues.
Okay, thanks.
The match play extension doesn't have to go back to the same hole as started. The committee can set a different order.
True, Mark. It doesn't have to. We tend to want to have players play in the same order of holes that we played their original match in. But you're right. Based on situations, we might alter the holes that match goes to. Okay, we got time for a quick rules quiz.
Hey, Craig, one question. Make a comment about earbuds.
Oh yeah, let's talk about noise. Yeah, it's a good point. I was going to talk about that. Let's go back to rules. What section is that in, Dr. Hicks? About noise, audio.
4.3, 4.3.3, 4.3.4.
Greg, you got to switch over to the full rules. Right now, it's on the players guide. Or keep scrolling up. Oh no. There you go. See it, Players Edition, and there you go. Yeah, 43A4.
Yeah, we do see players, especially in net tournaments. I have to hate. I don't want to pick on net tournaments. I must have missed number 4, audio and video. What is allowed during play is to listen to an audio or watching a video that is on matters unrelated to the competition being played, such as news reports or background music. I find it interesting that they allow background music, but in doing so, you need to be considerate for your fellow players. What's not allowed is listening to music or other audio to eliminate distractions or to help with swing tempo. So we need to know the difference between background music and swing tempo music. So get used to discerning yourself on learning that. Personally, I'd have a hard time knowing what the differences are. I think it's wise on our part to try to discourage players from listening to audio. But one time we were asked if a player could put in earbuds and play music because his fellow playing partner he's playing with in a playing group is rather annoying, rather talkative. And so the player wanted to wear earbuds so he could avoid distractions. Well, now it's clear in the rules that a player cannot wear earbuds for the purpose of avoiding distraction or to eliminate distractions. But again, the rule allows for it to be done. So you have to be careful on how you approach players and ask them what they're doing with their earbuds in their ear.
Well, hey, Craig, but that same guy that's so obnoxious wears ear plugs to block out all of the surrounding noise. And I'm assuming that that's illegal because in the old, you can't wear ear plugs like what you would wear in a factory to block out the noise.
No, I think the same thing would apply. The purpose of that earplug is to avoid eliminate distractions, which it certainly would be against the rules. So that player would be in a breach of a rule by using those earbuds. Dr. Hicks, did you want to add any more about noises? You're playing audio?
No, the only other thing I would just say, and I don't know who all's on this, if there are any new officials, I would just encourage them refereeing. We've talked about all these crazy scenarios about people doing things. Refereeing a match is probably one of the most enjoyable things that we do, and encourage them to do that. It's the best golf that we can be part of.
Very nice person.
Yeah, I want to emphasize too that
Wednesday.
there is, can someone mute that, please? Who's that? When you're out there
Wednesday, maybe
as a referee,
Saturday or Sunday or whatever.
Nothing
You're out there as a
Wednesday, planning on Friday carry out.
There's no family night?
No family.
when you are out there as a referee, you are part of a team for that day trying to conduct a series of matches. So you have a lot of other people able to assist the referee in conducting that match. So the same holds true anytime that we are out there as in any form of volunteering as a trouble hole person, starter. Anybody out on the course has a radio at their disposal and has a whole team of people willing and able to assist in any questions that might arise to help you feel more comfortable in dealing with situations. So I want to encourage the new volunteers not to, we don't expect new volunteers to know the rules as well as a seasoned veteran, but you have a lot of help out there to assist you. So we can still try to get to a quick quiz here if you want to get to that. You want to go to an intermediate? Or you want to try an advanced level this week? Everybody's muted. I'm sorry.
Advanced. Pain plus reflection equals progress.
Okay. This is a 10 question advanced quiz as per Kyle's request. Which one of the following is defined as advice? First one being asking an opponent which direction a hole goes, telling another player that his ball is 157 yards from the hole. Third one, asking an opponent which club he just hit on a par 3 after both players have teed off and their balls are on the putting green. And the last option is a player's caddy telling another player's caddy that the other player is standing too close to the ball on his chip shots, even if the other player's caddy does not inform the player about what he was told.
2.
We got a 2.
Number 4.
4.
4.
Players caddy.
Yeah, 2 is general knowledge. I mean, players are, 2 is general knowledge about how far a player's ball is away. I mean, we even allow players to share equipment in terms of rangefinders. Number 2, on the 4th hole of the single match between A and B, both players hit their approach shots into a penalty area and then agree to consider the hole halved and proceed to the 5th tee. What is the ruling? I don't think I talked about this, and I should have.
That's no problem.
First option is there's no penalty. This is agreement is permissible. There is no penalty provided they resume play on the 4th hole before either plays from the 15 area. Otherwise, they should be disqualified. One player must concede the 4th hole to the other player before either plays from the teeing area of the 5th hole. Otherwise, they should be disqualified.
No penalty.
The 5th one player should be disqualified.
No penalty.
Number 1.
Yeah, 1.
You know, the distinction here is you can agree to have a hole once play is started on that hole. You cannot agree to have a hole before either player has teed off. There's a slight difference on when you can agree to have a hole or have the hole tied. Now, concessions can happen. You can concede a hole, the stroke, or the match at any point during the match, before the match. That's a different on a concession. But for having, someone must have teed off before you agree to have. Third question, in which one of the following has a player proceeded without getting a penalty for practice during the round? In 4-ball stroke play, he has holed out for a 5 and hits a practice putt on the side of the green before his partner, who has putt for a 4, finishes the hole. Prior to the player playing his second stroke from the fairway, he makes a stroke at a plastic golf ball. In taking a practice swing in the rough, the player dislodges a concealed range ball. And the last item, the committee suspends play for darkness. The players group finishes putting out on the 9th hole. The one in his group will be second to play from the 10th teeing area. After play is resumed, the player hits a few more balls on the driving range before hitting to the 10th tee.
Number 3. Number 3.
Number 3.
In taking a practice swing, the player dislodges a concealed range ball.
Yes.
Okay, without getting a penalty for practice during the round. Very good. 4, in which of the following circumstances should the committee disqualify a player? Before making a stroke, the player moves the tee marker to give himself somewhere to stand for his stroke. A player lifts a tee marker before playing a stroke from the teeing area for no apparent reason and then replaces it. After playing a stroke from the teeing area, in order to assist the players behind him, a player moves a tee marker because he believes they are too close together.
All of the above.
All of the above.
Okay.
Two-stroke penalty.
Number 5, during a match Player A believes he is entitled to relief without penalty from an out-of-bounds fence. Without saying anything to his opponent, player B lifts his ball, drops it within 1 club length from the nearest point that gives him complete relief from the fence, and plays it. B sees A do this and feels that A was not entitled to relief. It says nothing to him at the time. What can B do about this? The first one is ignore the possible breach by A. Tell A that he wasn't permitted to do what he did, but will ignore it this time. Before either A or B tees off from the next tee, he can request a ruling. He can make a request for a ruling. Or the last choice is either A or C.
A or C.
A or C.
So
And
four.
B, yeah.
Yeah.
Tell A that he wasn't.
Both A and C. We'll see what happens at the end. If you've got questions on any of the items, we'll talk to them afterwards. Okay, we can probably go a little bit beyond noon and finish this up. Number 6, enforce some stroke play. Which of the following is correct regarding the order of play? If A plays when it's B's turn to play, the stroke counts and the side is penalized 2 strokes. If A purposely misses the ball with his stroke, it is now B's turn to play. When starting the hole, A tees off from outside the teen area. It is now B's turn to play. If A accidentally touches their ball and it moves, it is still A's turn to play. Which of the following is correct?
Of course. Okay. A plays when it's B's turn.
I'd say 4.
4.
Want to go with 4?
Yeah, 4.
Okay. 7, after teeing off on the first hole of a stroke play competition with his 3-wood, a player realizes that he forgot to adjust the weights of his driver to the preferred setting. Before teeing off on the second hole, he adjusts the weight on the driver. Before he tees off, his actions are questioned. What is the ruling? Since he has not made a stroke with the driver, you better get this right because we talked about it. Since he has not made a stroke with the driver, he is entitled to adjust the weight with no penalty before using it. Since he did not make a stroke with the driver after adjusting the weight, he may change the driver back to its configuration, start of the round with no penalty, and may continue to use it after that. He is penalized 2 strokes to be added to his score for the second hole. He must declare the driver out of play or be disqualified. The player is disqualified for changing the playing characteristics of a club selected for play.
2.
2.
2.
2.
2. In stroke play, a player's tee shot is known to have come to rest in an area of ground under repair and was not found after a 3-minute search. So it's known virtually certainly that the ball is in the ground under repair area. The player plays another ball from the tee under Rule 18.1, which comes to rest nearby, but outside the same area of ground under repair. The player then realizes that he could have proceeded under 16.1E without penalty. Oh, you got your, okay, we got to go through our little tailwind strokes versus penalty strokes here. So, players hit a tee shot. Okay, he goes back and plays another ball from the tee under 18.1. 18.1 is what? Stroke and distance, right? Lost ball? Or 18.1 is lost
Stroke and
ball.
distance.
He's going back to the tee, hitting 3. But now he finds his ball. His stroke and distance ball comes to rest outside the ground under repair. The player then realized he could have proceeded under Rule 16.1E without penalty. He lifts the second ball played from the tee, drops another ball in accordance with Rule 16.1E and plays out the hole, taking 3 strokes from there. What is the player's score on the hole?
8.
What is Rule 16E, 16.1E?
Is relief from abnormal ground condition.
Abnormal course conditions.
Why would he go back and hit the ball if it was in a ground under repair?
Stroke.
He didn't, because the player didn't find his original ball.
Was it known or virtually certain that it was in the ground under repair?
It's known, yeah. It's known to be coming into arrest of ground into repair. So he thinks that because he lost his ball, he's got to go back and play stroke and distance.
Right, but he really didn't.
Line 3.
He didn't really have to, did he?
No.
But because once he did, though,
Yes,
What's-
now he put another ball in play.
now he's got that ball in play. His version of ball that he finds is not in play anymore, right?
Right.
So by lifting the second ball from the tee, that he played from the tee,
He put that ball in play.
he's picked up his ball and played it from a wrong place, right?
Okay, so you got 2.
Well, 3 more actually, because he's taking stroke and distance again.
He took stroke and distance originally.
He already took that.
He's playing from the wrong place.
Yes.
Playing from the wrong. He's substituting ball and playing from the wrong place,
Okay.
which is
So
still
he's
just
gotta-
2 strokes.
Yeah.
So what do we got? We got. I see a bunch of who's doing these writing. Oh, is that
Should be 8.
Could be 8, yeah.
Yeah.
1-8?
If you got 2 from a wrong and 2 for the stroke and distance.
Okay, we'll go with 8. See what you get. Number 9, in stroke play, a player's ball lies in a sandy area in the general area. There is a mound of sand behind the ball. The player grounds his club lightly behind the ball, right behind the ball, lightly. And in doing so, he pressed down the mound of sand, improving his lie. The correct ruling in that is that the player gets what?
2 strokes.
No penalty, and the mound
In the
must be
general area.
restored.
Okay.
2 stroke. What do you?
Stroke penalty, he must play the ball.
Patrick Reed rule. 2 strokes.
No penalty. What?
He did
1,
it
2, 3,
twice.
or 4?
1
Right
or
here.
3?
3.
3, no 2-stroke penalty.
3.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
where's the ball as it lies?
Number 10. In stroke play, a player's ball is struck towards a penalty area and is not found. It is not known or virtually certain that the player's ball is in the penalty area, but he drops a ball under Rule 17-1D, which is the penalty area rule, penalty relief from penalty areas. Before he plays the drop ball, his original ball is found within the 3-minute search period.
Nobody dropped the ball.
So because it is not known or virtually certain, he's not entitled to take that relief, correct?
Right.
But he drops the ball anyway under Rule 17-1D, but now before he plays the drop ball, it's found. What is the ruling? Number 1, he must not play the original ball. The original ball was not in the penalty area. He gets a 1-stroke penalty under the 17-1D. He must continue. Drop ball.
No.
If not, he must return to where he last played and redrop the ball with a 1-stroke penalty under Rule 18.1. Second choice, the player dropped under an inapplicable rule. He is penalized 2 strokes, must abandon the drop ball and proceed with the original ball.
No.
Thirdly, the player dropped under an inapplicable rule. He is not penalized. He must abandon the drop ball and proceed with the original ball. Fourth choice, the original ball must not be played. He must abandon the drop ball and proceed under the stroke and distance, getting a 1-stroke penalty under Rule 18.1.
3.
That's
right.
3.
1 with 3. It's
Ah,
well, okay with it. We'll submit that. It's pretty important to know the different options when players in a penalty area, whether it's known or virtually certain or it's not known or virtually certain, okay? Let's see what we've got here. Any questions on number 1? Anybody have any questions on number 1? How about number 2? Any questions on 2?
No.
3 we got correct. Any questions from anybody though?
You got 1 incorrect.
Yeah, I figured 4 would be wrong.
4 is incorrect. This is kind of a tough, these tee marker things, it's after playing a stroke from the teeing area, in order to assist a player behind him, a player moves a tee marker because he believes they are too close together. In some cases, I forget the answer. No, did that player, he's going to get probably a 2-stroke penalty for moving the tee marker, but he's not going to be disqualified.
Yeah,
Right.
it's the general
Right.
general penalty.
General penalty.
General penalty.
General, okay, I see that. All right.
And in some cases, you're not even going to get a general penalty if you, if before making your stroke, you replace it, you know. I don't think you'd even be penalized for that, as long as no actions were taken
Right.
before the tee marker got replaced. But yeah, the one questionable one would be a general penalty, not disqualification. Okay, number 6, anybody have any questions on number 6?
Mm-mm.
Number 6, no, I'm sorry, number 5, we got 5 correct. Number 6, we got correct. Any questions on number 6? Order of the play, still his turn to play. Okay. In the other cases, they would be change their playing order. Number 7, we got correct. We talked about this, how a player, as long as he hasn't made a swing with that club, he's not going to be penalized as long as he restores it back to the configuration where he started the round. Number 8's correct. It's known to have come to rest in a ground under repair. So we got the right number of strokes and penalty talent strokes there. So good job on that one. Those can get kind of tricky.
Mm.
Anybody have any questions on how we counted those up?
No.
Okay. Number 9, we got incorrect. The key thing here is the player grounds his club lightly. If you look at a player taking a stance, it even says that in the description of how a player is entitled to take a stance and ground his club lightly. It may be in the definition. I'm not sure what.
Wouldn't it, Craig, it's similar to a waste bunker?
It was a waste bunker.
Right.
Well, it's a sandy area in a general area. I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's in a general area. So it's good. Yeah, it'd be like a waste area. Could be a waste area. But I think that's covered in the stance. Is that covered under stance? No, not under stance.
It's in rule
Craig,
8.
it's in the rule that's referred there.
It's in rule 8.
Okay, it's in rule 8. The conditions affecting the stroke. Okay. Yeah, it does describe how a player is entitled to ground his club lightly. And it mentions that, and that's the key word. If they use that, the player's going to be okay.
If he improves his lie, though, isn't that an infraction?
Yeah, I would think so. You mean like Patrick?
Like Patrick Reed did. He
Did
improved
in that waste bunker. Yeah.
Now, would that be considered lightly? He didn't
Not
think
in
he
my
did anything wrong, but we could obviously see he improved his lie.
Well, I'll take you back to what happened last year with
Only on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, in the PGA Tour, they allow anything. Matt Kuchar was in a waste area, and he was removing loose impediments near his ball. And before you know it, pretty soon his ball is almost like standing up on a tee.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's true.
officials right there watching him do it. So it's
Craig, I think the best way to say that is that if your ball's in a waste area, what this rule is saying is that you can ground your club in a fair manner, but if you know, when you do that, there is a chance that it could improve your lie.
Sure.
But if we said you couldn't improve your lie, then basically you would say you can't ground your club in a waste area, because by grounding your club, you automatically improve your lie. So what it's saying is that there's going to be some improvement by grounding your club. It's allowed. You just can't pull a Patrick Reed and scrape back more sand. And I just want to be clear before we end here. I'm the founder member of the Patrick Reed fan club, and respect everything that he does. But that's really the best way to answer that question.
Okay, thanks.
GAM is going to have a Patrick Reed fan club sign-up sheet pretty soon here, I think. And we talked about number 10. We got number 10 correct. Any questions on number 10? Again here, because it's not known or virtually certain the player's ball is in a penalty area, is the only reason he's allowed to go to the original ball. If that were known or virtually certain, that we saw an earlier example where you wouldn't be allowed to. Once that ball is dropped, that ball becomes the ball in play if it's known or virtually certain. Okay, I want to thank everyone for being here today.